recording. And so official welcome, everyone. Great to see you. Thanks for joining on this summer afternoon. We're a smaller group than usual, but perhaps that will make for a little bit more free flow of conversation. So great to have you. And just Peter Gable sends regards. He unfortunately was not able to be here today, and hated to miss the call, but needed to, and just sends his best to everyone. So, so we usually start traditionally with a go round for everyone just to kind of situate themselves in time and place and space, and just to ground here together before we launch into our conversation. So Perry is going to lead that today for us. So Perry, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nanette. Thank you. It's good to see everyone. So we're just going to have a go round, customary go round. I think everybody knows your name, but say your name, say where you are physically, and something that is new and good in your life before we get into the discussion. So let's see, why don't we start off with you, Rand? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I would like to pass and come in a little later. I've been thinking about what I want to share. I'm not
Sure.
quite put together yet.
Okay. All right. So what are the four I just added something. Your name, where you are physically, your connection to PISLAP, and something that's new and good in your life. So Bruce, I think you were next up.
Okay, I'm Bruce Peterson. I'm a retired judge in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm in my home office. I've been a member of PISLAP for probably 10 or 12 years and was a member of the executive committee for much of that time. And one thing that's new and special in my life is my daughter's getting married in 2 weeks. And I love, we have a new member of our family. I love this guy. So, and I've been getting to know him. He's been around for a while, of course, but I've been getting to know him better and better. And it's just, it's really great. So glad I tell you about that.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Let's see, Ann Friedman.
Hi. So I don't know how long I've been involved with PISLAP. It's at least 4 or 5 years. I knew Peter Gable in college, so it's sort of an old home week to be back with PISLAP. And I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, looking out at beautiful sun. It's like, you know, there's this terrible rain that comes by because of the storms moving up the coast, and then it's like gorgeous and it's like amazing, sort of typical fall weather. I'm looking out at trees in my backyard. And something that is new and great in my life is I started my fall semester teaching, and I had a family law class on Zoom last night, starting at 8:10 p.m., which is an amazing hour to get 56 or so students together. And we had a wonderful, open-hearted discussion about the material. And for the first time that I can remember, when I've been teaching constitutional law material, we had 25 minutes at the end just to chat about what we thought about the cases. And it's like, how did that happen? So we really had, it was really exciting. So I think there's something in the air or in me or in the world that is enabling more ease and comfort in the process of connecting with my students.
Terrific. Thank you. Duncan, I think you are here first, actually. So why don't you tell us your thing?
Sure. So I am Duncan Holloman. I live in Gloucester, Massachusetts now, and I'll come back to that as the new thing in my life, because that's a move for me that's quite recent. My connection with PISLAP, I still feel like I'm fairly new to PISLAP. Began attending the monthly meetings maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. I met Peter at a book party for his book. and enjoyed that connection. And I'm a recovering lawyer. I'm also a psychotherapist. So I'm interested in this convergence place that is PISLAP. So the new thing for me is swimming in quarries. In Gloucester, they have all these old quarries because there was lots of granite here. The Brooklyn Bridge is built mostly of Cape Ann granite. So they have these amazing quarries and they're filled with spring water that is absolutely pure and clear.
Wow.
And it's on a hot afternoon to go swimming in quarries, just such a treat.
Hey, sounds great. Sounds great. Elaine, nice to see you.
Yes, hello everybody. So my name is Elaine Quinn and I am in Ireland, right in the middle geographically. So between north and south, it's called County Longford, but not even many Irish people know where it is. So I forgive you if you don't know where I am. It's a beautiful sunny day here, as you can see. We don't always have this kind of weather, but we're having a kind of mini heat wave at the moment. I am having a bit of a chaotic time because I do have a young son and he hasn't been in childcare for several weeks now. So I'm kind of at the end of my tether, as we say in Ireland. He was supposed to be back yesterday, so I was all psyched up to get him back in there yesterday, and it turns out he couldn't go back because of COVID related stuff. So yeah, I had a pretty chaotic day, but actually the new thing in my life, it's just a small thing, but it was my birthday last week and my younger brother got me this little origami. It's a beautiful little delicate creation of little cranes, and it was by an Irish lady actually, who each of the cranes takes an hour to make, I think. But I had a moment of peace just before the call and I was just looking at it and I was like, you know, compared to the rest of my day, it was just this lovely moment. So yeah, that's just something small. And my connection to PISLAP is I'm a member of the executive committee now. I gratefully took over from Bruce when he left, and we created an issue of a magazine that I started a few years ago last year, which many of you probably have seen. So yeah, that was a great collaboration. So lovely to be here.
Thank you. Good to have you. Absolutely. Yudong, why don't you take a turn?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Yudong. I have been with PISLAP since, I think, November of last year. And basically, I got to know Peter fairly well after a couple of monthly calls and everything. Yeah, and Peter has been like a mentor-like figure to me at PISLAP, but also I got to know other people at PISLAP as well. I felt like, you know, it's a great community. You know, we have people who are passionate about starting things that are, you know, more healing oriented, less competitive, and certainly unconventional in a good way. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm preoccupied with for, I think, a long time in my academic career, because I felt like a lot of the stuff we learned is like very, you know, it's very theoretical, right? And in practice, it's like something else. You know, there's a lot of misuse of the subjects matter people learn from school. And I feel like what PISLAP is doing is, you know, is again, rejuvenating the, you know, good-hearted, human-centric vision that I think we all share to a certain extent. And something new, well, I think this summer, I was doing the Healing Circle with the International Rescue Committee. So that was something fairly new. And the Healing Circle was basically devoted to helping refugee students settle down, helping them, you know, get to know each other. I mean, just the most basic thing we're doing. And we're working also with a Canadian nonprofit organization devoted to mental health called For a Safer Space. So they, in the process, provide us with like a lot of mental health aspect of it. You know, a lot of refugee students they experience cultural shock, maybe to a certain extent, discrimination, any form of perceived hostility. I felt like those things we're really working on to help them open up and understand it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to, have a conversation. So that's the new thing. And I'm just excited that my school is going to start August 30th. For the first time in 2 years, it's going to be in person again, not over Zoom. So that's exciting.
Great, great, great. Good to have you with us. Bonnie, are you there?
Yes.
Ah, great. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see
Why
you
don't-
too.
Why don't you
I'm
have a go?
Bonnie.
Yeah,
Pardon me.
go ahead.
I'm Bonnie Silvestri. I am here in Sarasota, Florida. It's quite beautiful. Summer day here. And I started with PISLAP. I was trying to go back in my mind, and I think it was maybe 2004, somewhere in there, that I met Nanette and started going to meetings in New York City at dinner, and it was just so great. And we actually did like a little television, some interviews for a local television station. So I've been sort of remembering all of those great times that we had back in New York. And then something new, I kind of wanted to say two, if it's okay. One was that this past weekend, I was working with a group of parents, and we did a petition, and I kind of felt like this really interesting surge of community engagement and energy around mask mandates for the schools, because I've been sort of just overwhelmed by the fact that wasn't taking care of children didn't seem primary in a lot of people's minds. So the fact that we were able to get our school board to pass a mask mandate was a huge relief and gratifying. And then the other thing was that we were selected for a film festival that I mentioned. Actually, we're in 2 next month, and I was going to provide all the information. One is the Social and Economic Justice Film Festival, and the other one is the 10th International Social Change Film Festival called Change Fest. So we're really excited. Both of those are going to be starting. One's in September. It's just like a one-night thing. And then the other one, the film will be up for several months. So I've mentioned it before, and I could get into it later, but it's a film about family leave, which is actually very high up on the agenda for the administration and maybe passing soon. So it was us delving into that issue and why it's so important.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, if you're not multitasking, are you there? Yes, he's
Yes,
there.
hi, I am, I'm actually, yes, nice to meet everyone and see everyone and to be here again. And I'm in New York City, and it's just cleared after 3 days of rain, of torrential rain, although I don't think of the order that has been previously discussed in this call. What's new for me is that I have taken on, and it was just assigned to me on Friday, a second class for the mediation and meditation class that I teach at John Jay College for undergraduates, except this one is completely asynchronous, which means I don't get the opportunity to interact with my students in the way that I want to. So how do you teach asynchronously meditation and mediation? I mean, either one on their own, I think is a challenge. So after I said yes, it was kind of like jumping off a admittedly friendly cliff, and just wondering, what did I do? And I'm in free fall now. I promised my students that I would post the syllabus this afternoon. And I'm scrambling to find ways to, I'm not scrambling, but I'm working very, very hard to timely live up to my commitment to post a video. I mean, to post the course and all of its constituent parts by today. So that's what's going on for me. And I appreciate, I noticed someone in the chat. Thank you, Bonnie. Maybe I can, if I had time, I'd love to take you up on your offer. That's very generous of you. I almost feel like I don't have time in the moment, but maybe if I could ask for your email address, I will
Sure.
email you and ask for your suggestions. I do have a lot of guidance from John Jay and from CUNY, but it's how do you convey the ineffable through dots and digits, right? I mean, or zeros and ones is really the germane question for me. So thank you very much. Great to be here.
Okay, Brad, we'll forgive you if you blank out your screen because you have to work on your syllabus.
Thank you, Perry. I am listening and appreciating what everyone says. I just don't want everyone to see my eyes go back and forth as I cut and paste, into my syllabus. Thank you again.
No problem. No problem. Carolyn, nice to see you. Why don't you take a go?
Harry, it's great to see you. It's been a long time. It must be like a decade or something since I've seen you in person.
A decade.
Well, I was thinking about when did I first connect with PISLAP, and Nanette probably knows for sure, but I'm thinking it's around 2000, right?
Yeah, I think that's about right, Carolyn.
I was at the retreat in Washington State, and that was like 2001, right? Or 2000, forget. I had been living in Taiwan for almost 12 years, and I returned to the States in September of 1999 and attended a meeting of the International Alliance of Holistic Lawyers, which is where I met Perry. Before going to Taiwan, I worked as a corporate lawyer in big multinational organizations, and in Taiwan, I had an international law practice, but I also became a teacher of Buddhist meditation at a large monastery, teaching the Westerners, and studied calligraphy and Chinese brush painting and started studying energetic healing, which I continued when I returned to the States. So here in the Hudson Valley where I live, and I've lived here since '99, I'm in Ulster County, between the Mohawk Mountain House and Kingston, New York, about 2 hours north of Manhattan in Stone Ridge. I have a small law practice out of my home. I'm also a mediator. I've done a lot of programs on cross-cultural communication and implicit bias and things like that over the years. But I've also graduated 4 times from a Florida college that teaches energy healing combined with studies in psychology. So I'm trained to do this work, to supervise graduates of the school and to teach it. So I'm a lawyer, healer, mediator, and in the last decade, a budding artist. And what's new is finally framing paintings I did 2.5 years ago, which are on the wall behind me, and there's some others around the room. And I just hung those this weekend while Henry was raining on us and reminding me of the tropics. So great to be with everyone today.
Nice to have you. Rand,
Yeah.
are you ready? Are you ready?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Good. So I'm Rand Rosenblatt. I'm in Philadelphia. Ann Friedman and I are married, so we're actually just across the hall in our separate studies and computers and so forth. I first met Peter Gable in the 1970s when he was in law school and in part of the critical legal studies movement that I was also involved in. And I have been involved in a number of spiritually oriented practices over the years related to law. I also taught constitutional law for 40 years or so, retired in 2018. I'm part of an anti-racism theory study group. So I've been going a lot deeper into the whole dynamics of race in our society. I feel like I'm finally learning how to teach this subject that I stopped teaching a few years ago, and it's a fascinating journey. I'm also very struck by what's happening in Afghanistan right now, and the sort of amazing double, it's almost a schizophrenic situation. I mean, the American military has done so many destructive things in the service of so much exploitation and terrible things, and certainly going back to our own history with our own indigenous people. And yet, at the same time, they are perceived, not in ways that make some sense as promoting something that's good. I mean, these Afghan people handing their babies up to the Marines at the Kabul airport think that there's some they want their children to have this other, be part of this other world that has so many wonderful things and so many terrible things. So I'm wrestling with all that, and from a spiritual and political perspective.
Okay, thanks for sharing. We're getting into our program time, but I think we have time to squeeze in Stuart, Nanette, and myself. Stu, good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to hear.
We're asking the 4 questions, like Passover. What is your name? Where are you physically? What's your connection to PISLAP, and what is new in your life and good?
Sounds great. My name is Stu Webb. I'm from Minneapolis, and it's very kind of rainy here, which we love a little rain here, not the Tennessee type. And I've been PISLAP member for quite a long time, maybe 10 years or so. Met in New York when we first got started with a lot of folks, and then California, and been connected as much as possible. Been kind of a troublemaker sometimes. Very hard of hearing, so I really appreciate the live transmission that is showing up here that anybody can plug into. And it also means that you're creating a live transmission copy of everything that's being said. Going back to what I'm doing, I've been a Buddhist since 1990, meditated since then. At the same time, I've been a lawyer since 1964, retired in 2018. Oh, too loud?
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
And litigating lawyer, 20 some years, got tired of that. And in 1990, about the same time I became a Buddhist, I created something called collaborative law, which means that we as lawyers will work with a conflicted party outside of court, but we won't go to court. And if the parties can't work it out with our help, we withdraw. And we also now have child specialists, coaches, neutral financial people who are part of our group. And what we are learning is something that we need to learn, need to do in our life. We as the practitioners are the participants professionally. We hold the highest space we can while we're working with the couple. We don't get down to the energy of the people. And when we hold that higher space, we start transmitting that to them, even though we don't know we're doing that, but we're sending them love and regard. At the same time, we're working with the couple. What happens is the conflicted couple starts rising up in their energy, and they start seeing, they start actually seeing the other person instead of doing the arguing. So anyway, all of that stuff, and I appreciate so much being part of this group. So love you all. Thank you.
Okay, Nanette, I'll take a quick go, turn it over to you so you can take your turn and lead us on our session here. So I'm Perry Sedman. I am in beautiful Miami Beach, Florida. I have been a member of PISLAP almost since inception and a member of the executive committee for a very long time. I practice, or I'm semi-retired, a private practitioner of design law, which is a specialty within intellectual property. And I enjoy it very much, although I'm doing less and less as time goes on. One thing that's new for me is that I have my application in, you might say, to the University of Miami Law School to be an adjunct in the spring semester teaching design law.
Wow,
And
wonderful.
I'm very much hoping that I get the appointment, because last time I did this was 12 years ago at GW Law School, and I enjoyed it very much, but I was overwhelmed by the demands of private practice. And I think my challenge, and I have been thinking about this, maybe we'll talk about this in the general session, but my challenge, which has always been there, is how to bring the principles of spirituality and into my teaching. In other words, design law is a very, substantive winner loser corporate kind of practice, money oriented, and it's hard to get the opponents in litigation to think of each other as human beings. So that's been my challenge. Corporations are people, right? Try to tell some of my clients that. Anyway, so that's what's going on for me. Nanette, how about you?
Thanks, Perry. Thank you, everyone. I tremendously enjoyed this go round. So I'm Nanette Shore, and I'm here at my kitchen table in my apartment in New York City, looking out on a little bit of a park here, and beyond the park, although I can't quite see it from my kitchen table, is the East River of Manhattan. So I'm in Queens, but within view of the East River. And it's a beautiful place to be, actually. I was really, I was glad that Perry asked the question about people's connection to PISLAP, because it just, some of what folks shared brought back some memories. Perry said he was here almost since the inception, but actually he was here since the inception. Yeah. And I remember the retreat that Carolyn was referring to. It was in a wonderful retreat center in the state of Washington called Sleeping Lady. And we had a member named Paul Leto who organized that for us. And we had folks coming from all over the country. And I also remember the gatherings in New York City that Bonnie and I worked on together. And, it was early days of restorative justice. And we were talking about that a lot, and also about social responsibility in business, and bringing an ethical dimension into thinking about the world of business. So that was interesting work as well. And also what Yudong shared about his work with refugees, students, children as well, really, of course, evoked for me what is happening right now in Afghanistan, and the fact that there are many, many refugees coming here who need to be settled. And of course, as Iran really brought up, just touched the hem of the difficult issues that we're all wrestling with. So perhaps we'll get into that a little more in our conversation. And in my work life, I work in Bronx Legal Services, which is a legal services office. So it's an organization that represents low-income people in New York City. It has a mission of racial, social, and economic justice. And I've been involved in this very interesting project called Fostering Healing-Centered Schools in New York City. And there was a community organization that one of the attorneys I supervised helped to build and create, and I was involved with it as well. And that community organization came, sort of a long story, but basically helped to form a task force, which came out with some very powerful recommendations that are actually being grappled with by the New York City Council, by the New York City Department of Education. So that was a very exciting initiative that happened over this last 2 years. And then that wonderful staff member just left the office. And so I'm now grappling with how to continue that work with all the other responsibilities I have. So it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity as well. So a lot going on. And it's been really nice over the summer to start to see people and travel again. So I appreciate that too. So maybe moving into, of course, we've already launched the conversation, which was really part of the point, but just to review the questions that we were hoping to grapple with. And then I think we're just gonna.
You froze up, Nanette. Nanette, you're
open it
frozen.
up for folks to like what Anne. Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
am I back?
You're back.
Thanks. I mean, Anne gave a very concrete example of that with her class last night. What has been effective for us? Where have we countered obstacles? How can we support each other in the work? And obviously, the work is not separated from what's happening in the larger world. So to me, what's happening around Afghanistan, for example, is intertwined with how we activate the spiritual dimension in our own work, because we also grapple with what's happening in the larger world around us as we grapple with the law. So just with that bit of introduction, maybe we can just open it up and see who would like to share a few thoughts and get us started. And we'll just have an open dialogue.
I'll jump in.
Let's do.
One of the things, we've always heard 1,000 upon 1,000 times that we have to know ourselves. We just hear that, but we nod nicely. But it's really the thing we need to grok, that we need to think about ourselves, because that's where it starts. And if in our thinking, we're being judgmental and angry and pissed off and negative, that's the kind of thing we need to look at, because that's creating negativity in our world. If you look at quantum mechanics stuff, absolutely, you're voting against integrating spirituality in law and politics. So the task is bottom up. We can't look at the big picture and say, how are we going to solve that? Each of us needs to solve it. So the things that Carolyn talked about is right on. It's so beautiful to hear her expressing what's going on with her. And I wasn't able to hear the other people, but I think that's so wonderful that we can share at that level, because that's the level that things get solved. As Einstein says, you can't solve the problem at the same level as the problem. You got to start at the bottom. Know yourself. Philosophers been saying that for years. We need to grok it. G-R-O-K. I pass. Love you.
I'd like to follow Stu.
Yeah, go
Please
ahead.
go ahead, please.
Okay.
I think we're a small enough group, folks can just jump in.
I didn't know if I had to raise my electronic hand or not. I was thinking Afghanistan it's hard to grok it all and feel peaceful, but for me, the harder thing to grok and feel peaceful has been watching the responses to COVID. Because I've been following what's happening in Taiwan closely, and from January of 2020 till March of 2021, out of 23.7 million people in the second most densely populated country on the planet, without shutting business down, they had 12 deaths. They wore face masks, they washed their hands, they quarantined very seriously. You were checked on 3 times a day if you were quarantined to make sure you were all right. But of course, that was a big disincentive to break your quarantine too. And there was an app where your neighbors would know if you were quarantined, which in this country people would object to. But I was thinking, well, I'd like to know if someone near me was quarantined, so I'm not going to their house or whatever. Anyway, so it's a vibrant democracy, and they have their democracy, and they managed COVID well. And for me, it was hard to hold my center this last year and watch all these people dying in this country and all the arguments, and just feel like all I could try to do was just be here and try to stay calm, because that's the world we live in, right? Where there's overwhelming things, including climate change, that make it hard to stay centered. And following what Stu said, I'm assuming what he liked was my artwork, I hope. But I find great pleasure in the simple things now, and just taking time to do what feels fun and relaxing, right? And that's how, part of how I think we can keep our balance. Thanks for listening.
I might like to follow that, because I wonder what kind of suggestions or what thoughts. I feel I have these skills to offer, so I kind of organize people around doing a petition. But it's really hard to watch so much civic unrest when I've been trained in how to mediate or how to bring people together. But to see this kind of breakdown that I have never really seen in my lifetime, particularly around protecting our most vulnerable children who haven't been vaccinated, it's been really hard. Or watching people who don't want to wear a mask at work, when that would be helpful for everyone in our community. So I'm curious how, like when Stu was talking about raise everyone up, and I love all those ideas, but I have been wondering how we bring that to this discussion. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's definitely top of mind.
Bonnie. Does anyone want to share some thoughts around?
I want to share a thought, something that has been very helpful to me lately, and that I've heard about for years, but is kind of new for me to actually have grok it to the extent that I can go in and out of contact with it on a regular basis, is thinking about all of us, and this is very close to what Stu has often talked about, thinking about all of us as expressions that are localized in a tapestry of all of life. And so each little expression somewhere is only part of the whole. And part of what I find amazingly helpful and challenging is to let go the idea of right and wrong thinking about what any of the energy locations are doing, even including, for example, former President Trump. That is, that it's all like trees, rocks, people, animals, plants are all concentrations of the energy that makes up the universe. And there's something about fighting things, like seeing them as the enemy, and right and wronging takes us down into a kind of chaotic perspective. And if somehow we can have sort of do, our meditation practices, our energy healing, whatever we're doing, we can go back to some kind of image. For me, imagery is very powerful, just sort of seeing everything connected, the threads of everything are connected. And that's just another expression over there. And that, being is doing whatever it's doing to express whatever it's here to express. And there might be great suffering that they are participating in, or there might be it might look really broken, but that's just what they're doing. It's kind of like the many lives of the Buddha, you know, that he went through many lives, and he, you know, was a thief in one life and he was something else in another life. And it's somehow thinking like that calms my system enough that then I can think about what, from my location, how can I relate to an issue or to people or to trees or to whatever in some way that makes sense in terms of, that might be constructive or that would make sense, you know. But it's like I have to not be caught in the chaos. And not, because whatever we fight grows in strength. Whatever we, you know, whenever we put negative attention out, that just gets the war going. So I think there's a huge amount of work for us who are concerned with law in particular to think about how to have accountability for people who are harming other people, or, you know, who are making bad decisions in some way. And that's part of the whole story too. But for me, it's completely different if we're doing it from a hooked in chaotic place to defend ourselves out of fear, or whether we're able to access more a sense of the love and just the energy, that it's neutral, you know, that we're all part of the expression of all that is. And I used to think of this as sort of an airy fairy way of thinking that was just, you know, enlightenment over there, and I have to be over here. And now it feels like practical, like a practical strategy for calming my system, and, you know, looking at where I'm hooked, you know, by whatever I'm encountering. So I hope that feels like an offering and not a preaching.
I love that, and thinking of that when we said airy fairy, that's what the materialist people have been telling us for years. Oh, don't listen to all that spirituality nonsense. That's just nothing. Got nothing to do with our materialism and our desire for money. Don't mess around with that. So it's interesting. It's hard for us to hold that kind of higher party line because majority people put it down. That's interesting. But I appreciate what you said. One further thought.
Yeah, I'd like to
go
jump
ahead,
in.
Jack, go ahead, Duncan, go ahead.
And Stu, I want to pick up on something that you were saying, that is, and maybe I'm somewhere in between Stu and Ann on this one, that a lot of my work as a therapist is around self-awareness, self-use, what's happening to me in the moment. When I do couples work, that's a lot of the focus. What is it like for you to hear your partner say that to you? And so that question, what is it like for you, or what's your experience when you hear that? That's also core to the work that I do in dialogue. I think that's a little different from saying something like, I don't want to experience my own negativity. And I worry about that. That is, I need to be honest with myself when I get angry about something. So for me, the self-awareness keeps me from acting it out. So the problem for me is not the emotion. It's not, I don't believe in positive or negative emotions. They're like Ann's trees. They're just what happens to me. The difficulty is if I'm not skillful about my own inner world, then I project and I act it out. For me, that's the core skill. And I would love to have a course in law school that's just called Your Inner World, right? Being a lawyer is being a person. And law is not about abstract concepts entirely. It's about being a person in personal situations. That's what the actual practice of law is about. I didn't have any courses in that. Zero. And I just find that really striking. So it wasn't until I got into psychotherapy that I realized, I mean, my own work as well as you know, my training is like, oh my God, I'm it. I'm my instrument. That's how I do therapy, is that I'm Duncan.
Thank you, Duncan. I love that.
I just thought I'd jump in for a moment and just say that, I mean, I think that approach that Duncan, you're speaking about is what's inspired me to teach this mediation and meditation course, is that we start with learning about what's occurring within ourselves, our relationship to conflict, our relationship to our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and learn how conflict then expresses itself and how we respond to conflict. We're really learning mediation from the inside out, and then learn the mediation. And I think because law is inherently implicates so much of human relationship. I went to law school after pursuing a spiritual path for 20 years in my 40s. And so I really saw my brain being rewired to see people as objects in consciousness rather than as subjective beings with interiority. And it really was challenging for me to kind of make that switch. And I don't know that I was totally successful in imbibing it. Because I just saw that what about these individuals? What were their perspectives? What were their stories? And so I really resonate with what you're saying about law school, including that type of perspective and approach, so that people do not become divorced from their own interiority and from what makes us human beings in the most precious and important ways, in order to become a good lawyer. Because it's kind of like you almost have to drum that out of you, it seems, to do that from certain perspectives. And certainly the environment of law school doesn't help with that. The way that the grading occurs, you're competing against everyone else, the intense pressure. So I think that I really resonate with what you're saying, and so felt I should really jump on and give a thumbs up and verbally.
Well, I wanted to support also the idea of expanding law school programs to include studies in psychology and techniques for inner work. I think that's the most life-saving, powerful thing we can give to people, frankly. And personally, I think we should be teaching it in elementary school, like we should be teaching meditation in elementary school, just as part of programs. For myself, when I get negative emotions, it's always an invitation to go inside and find the particle of my subconscious that's forgotten that I'm being supported by the divine and work with it. So the negative emotion is always a really good opportunity to go in and look at some fears or misunderstandings. And it's not easy work, and hats off to all of us, because it's such a pleasure to be with a bunch of people who I know are doing the work and to be able to talk about it. I want to mention one last thing, and then I'll stop talking and let other people talk. This year, the State Bar's Dispute Resolution section, I helped set up their fall program last fall and their annual meeting in January. And in both of those meetings, I had a section of the program that was people like J. Kim Wright from, that I co-founded Renaissance Lawyer with, and others of the movement of, which is now global. We had people from South Africa and England who were talking about conscious contracting and neuropsychology and things. And this program would be impossible 20 years ago. Even 10 years ago, I couldn't have done it in a state bar. But this year, it was not only well received, including the discussion about should we consider changing the lawyer's oath from upholding the law to the physician's oath of doing no harm. And someone said, what about changing it to being a peace builder, which is even sweeter. This program was not in disharmony with the rest of the day, because all the panels in those two fall and annual meetings were in this new paradigm of people looking for better, healthier ways, integrative ways to function. So I just want to put it out there, Duncan, you can have your course, and I'm going to knock on wood that you have it within a year because the time is right now. So go for it.
I just wanted to follow up on a couple things. We do work with mindfulness practices in my course, as does Brad. And in fact, I've enlisted him to make a presentation to my class later this fall. And one of the most challenging things for the student is negative emotions. For the students is negative emotions. And we use the poem by Rumi, The Guest House. Maybe some of you know it. It's very quick. I'll read it. It just sums this whole topic up beautifully. This human being is a guest house, every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. So awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond, which I have been working with for 20 years and haven't solved it yet, but at least there's a model. I also wanted to say, Anne, that the dilemma you posed is, I think, probably the central one in my career, which has been how to hold people accountable and still be open to their humanity, their higher self, their potential. I don't want to go on too much. My wife and I often use a book called Precious Bane by Amy Webb, where it's a beautiful book. She hasn't done a lot. It's about a little farm girl in the 1800s, and she sees that everybody has a role. We're like puppets, and it ain't easy to be a bad puppet. You know, they got a really difficult role to play, but what would the play look like if there wasn't some drama in it? And I think, Ian, that's kind of what was coming to my mind when you were talking about we're all locus of energy, and if you diminish or demean someone else for their energy, it's not what you judge it should be. It just makes it worse. If you see them as having been ordained to play this role at least at this point of time in this incarnation, somehow it is relaxing. So good conversation. Thank you.
I was going to share something a few different people said was making me think about how law school, we're learning the cases and we just learn these names and we don't really learn their backstory. The case law doesn't really involve that. And I've been teaching women in the law for a really long time. And I mentioned that when I had my daughter, I started to see how the kinds of employment discrimination that I was learning, that I was teaching and had learned about could actually happen to anyone in the workplace. So I was sort of experiencing the cases in a different way from when I was just teaching them and here's a plaintiff and everything like that, but to actually experience what happens to you as you become a mother in a lot of circumstances was really amazing to me. And that's what inspired me to make the movie that I mentioned at the beginning. And then more recently, when I've been teaching the class, I've been focusing almost exclusively on the stories of the individual women who brought their cases to the Supreme Court. And the students just absolutely love that. I mean, they always enjoyed it and we would try to dig in, but I found a book that really explores the humanity behind the actual plaintiffs that brought their cases to the Supreme Court. And it's just a whole different way of looking at law that makes it, to me, far more interesting. So what you were saying kind of made me think about that.
One thing I've been thinking of, thank you, Bonnie, because you just said a magic word. You just said for the first time in this discussion, the word love. And it's a word we tend to ignore, both in spirituality and in materialism. We think of love as being a romantic love rather than a love like you described between you and your daughter. That's the kind of love that is integrated in all of us. And we tend to ignore it and respond, oh my God, we can't talk about love. Consciousness, the biggest picture of consciousness for me is love. But we just can't talk about it.
I love what you're saying, Stuart. I think that this usage of the word, the nomenclature love, is very weighted towards the personal and the romantic, and certainly it encompasses that, but isn't limited to it. And there's a there's a force in, I think, in nature that has given rise to this moment. And the word love to me is compelling because it's not static in any way, and it's both pulling us closer and also moving us outward at the same time. And you're talking about quantum physics, and so I think love reorders our understanding of time and space and our place in it and our role and responsibility in enacting what seems to be some type of movement or push to embrace itself further and more deeply with every moment.
Maybe just to say a few more words about that. I guess to me, one of the embodiments of what you could call love in the law is about listening and hearing and really tuning into where other people are at and not going to a place of judgment. And when Anne was talking, I was thinking about a client I spoke with the other day who has not vaccinated any of her 4 children, who all are kids with disabilities, and will be headed back to school, and there's all kinds of complexities about it. And I it's just kind of tuning into who is this, what are the struggles this woman has faced in her life? What are the, what's the community that she's from, and where is she, just where is she situated, and why does she feel this way? And trying to just, sort of step back and more. And if you use the word love, it really means a place of, I can't really empathize with her position because I don't personally agree with it, but I can, learn to listen to her, to understand. And if you, and it seems like that's a real guide to being a lawyer. And if you think about other issues we've touched on, of course, we've just barely touched on Afghanistan, and that's, foreign policy that actually looks at what's the experience of the people who were involved in this struggle? What is the experience of the people that fought in Afghanistan and lost family members? And what does it feel like to them, how we've pulled out? And what does it feel like to, activists in Afghanistan? And, it doesn't necessarily give an answer, but I think sort of living into the life experience and the feelings of others is a guide. It's a guide to our to thinking through, how to respond, or what one's own feelings are. So anyway, those are just a few thoughts. I know we only have a couple more minutes. Does anyone else want to share? I do want to say a few things before we break about the PISLAP intensives that are coming up. But let me just open it up for a couple more comments. Looks like we're getting ready to wrap up. And
I want to
Yeah, go
add
ahead.
one thing, which is I just want to hold up the strand that Yudong and some other people mentioned earlier about the importance of the way we hold each other up. We create spaces where we can make connection with these values. And that it's something that I appreciate that we're doing today and that we do. And I want to keep thinking about how we can take what's going on. Like when I come into a call and I hear about what everybody's doing, and then I think, oh my God, there's all this stuff that people are doing, that people have shared today that I'm learning from. And that's probably true in every PISLAP call that we have. And I think there may be a flowering of connectedness, that where we could activate our strands, our connections with each other even more than we already do, so that we can raise our collective vibration and our collective capacity. And I think I think the executive board and PISLAP have been great about this, but I just see a possibility of even more. And I just wanted to say that before we close.
Thank you, Anne. And I agree, there's a lot more potential yet to be realized. And if you or other folks do have suggestions about how we can, deepen in that way, please pass them on. I know many folks have in the past, and that's always very welcome. Was there anyone else who had their hand raised before? So let me just say a couple words about our next event, which is, it's sort of a mini conference, but we've called it PISLAP Intensives. So it's built over, I know you've all seen the emails, but just really to summarize briefly, it's built over a 5-day period. And it's Thursday through Tuesday, excluding Sunday, starting with September 29th, ending with October 5th. And it's what we're doing is 2 hours each day with a conversation, dialogue panel, but will be very interactive on different subjects. So we have Fania Davis on the 29th leading a panel on restorative justice and social change and social transformation. Fania is a tremendous leader in this field and has spoken at previous PISLAP events. On the Friday, September 30th, we've got Doug Amar and Ross Brockway from the Georgia Justice Project talking about bringing a spiritual dimension to law practice. Again, it's from 11 a.m. East Coast time to 1 p.m. with the thought of folks from Europe can join because it's in the early evening for them, and folks from the West Coast can join at 8 a.m. for them. So that's why we chose the times we did. On the Saturday, October 1st, we have 2 events. We have a panel from 11 to 1 on bringing a spiritual dimension into law, with Sylvia Clute, who has done a lot of work on what she calls unitive justice, which is a type of restorative justice that's practiced in the schools, and Dr. Param, who maybe some of you have heard on other calls. He'll be joining us from India, and he's done a lot of thinking on spirituality in the law. And then following that 2-hour panel, we'll go into a virtual cocktail party on Zoom. And probably with some breakout groups as well, so people can talk in smaller groups, and maybe we'll also talk in a larger group. And then on the Monday, we've got a European panel led by Mumta Ito. Maybe, I don't know, is Elaine still? Elaine, you want to say just a word or so about Mumta?
Yeah, sure. Mumta is the founder of Nature's Rights. So those of you who are familiar with earth law and advocating for nature to have, this is going to be a very simplistic explanation, but elements of nature to have legal rights in the same way that human beings do, and not be seen as objects as they have been. That's generally what her work is about. Although Mumta does have, she's very aligned with PISLAP in just having that deeper spiritual perspective, and recognizing that it's not simply about just giving one river a legal right of action. It's a far deeper process, but it's a step on the way. And yeah, so she's a wonderful speaker. I've known her for a few years, and she lives at the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I'm sure there'll be a longer description going out in an email shortly, so you can read more about her work.
Thank you, Elaine. And then, so that's on the Monday, October 3rd, the first Monday in October at 11, from 11 to 1, again, East Coast time. And then the last panel is on the Tuesday, the 4th, same time frame. And that's called Transformative Mediation in the Context of Legal Services Work. That will be Antoinette Ruel, who actually led a panel back in our CUNY conference, CUNY Law School conference some years ago on a project that she started that I'm co-leading with her in bringing mediation to a low-income community in the Bronx. I know that's something Brad is also doing in his own work. But of course, we're going to broaden it and look at the transformative power of mediation. Those are the intensives you can join. You don't have to join all of them to join. And we'll send out more the larger descriptions, but just wanted to give a little bit of a teaser to folks. And of course, it'd be wonderful if you could come to as many as possible. And please do spread the word to others, even if they're not part of the PISLAP community. So we won't be having another phone call before the intensive. So the first one will be afterwards, and we haven't planned this yet. So we'll be doing that. Harry, anything you wanted to say before we wrap up?
No, but if any of you have any thoughts on what I said at the beginning, which is how to bring two opposing parties together whose goal is to extract as much money as they can from the other in a human way, shoot me an email or a PM, and I'd be glad to learn of that sort of wisdom.
Thank you, Harry. All right, well, thanks so much for joining, everyone, and be well, and see you all soon. Have a good.
Thank you.